Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Brick Tier. With me is Professor Godt, the usual co-host.
Greetings, everyone. Today we'll be reviewing all of the Lego Castle minifigures from the Golden Age, which is up to 1999.
Very golden era for Lego Castle. A lot of people remember that fondly.
To 1999. Your Majesty,
Very
would you bring up
golden
the
era
tier sheet?
Lego Castle. A lot of people remember that fondly. I will. Let's see. Share my screen. Share screen. Switch to that tab. And here is the figures we're looking at today. If I scroll down, yep.
We have sets. We have minifigures from the very first castle, the Yellow Castle in 1987, all the way to the first wave of Knight's Kingdom, which came out just at the turn of the millennium.
Definitely a wide variety of factions and themes here.
Indeed. The Lego Castle line has some of the most varied figures of any wave up to in the Golden Age. So we have the most factions, the most color differences, the most different combinations. So I had to narrow it down to very specific members from each faction to get a very proportionate sample.
Definitely. A lot of people tend to link, when they think of castle, they think to lump a lot of themes together, like whether it's castle, Knight's Kingdom was all very much similar. Whereas Lego Pirates, for example, always relaunches as Pirates each time. I don't really like vary up the name.
Correct.
Oh, exactly. Everyone always comments on how the figures look happy.
It appears to be the same person, has a very consistent commentary.
Very true.
I am ready to begin with the first figure when you are.
I think we're good. If anyone didn't get the link for voting, I'm going to post it in the chat right now just so you have that.
We have several figures to go over today, so we will be going very quickly. So.
It's good. So there's the link to go. And the issue we had last time is resolved, so no one will be able to vote more than once. Awesome. So let's see. No problem, Brooksmania, and thank you for voting and everything. Thank you for joining us when you could. So who do we want to go over first?
All right, Your Majesty, would you bring up my image?
Yep.
This is the very first Lego Castle minifigure, or one of 5. Back then, we did not see very many torso prints as we do now. So this was one of the very first Castle minifigures back from 1987. This is from the Yellow Castle set. This was before we saw the proliferation of gray, such as in the Castle and Space sets in the 80s. So we only see gray in the helmet. We have a unique helmet mold. This was the first ever visor element, even before the Space Police visors in 1987. However, I have seen these in real life. They are quite flimsy and they are not quite as reliable as we see later on. However, it is very interesting to see this innovation so early. There's no actual
reused very much.
So we see some stickers such as here. It isn't quite applied properly on this figure. We have a crown. Others have a shield. One has a cross. It is all very detailed, very ornate, and very unique figures. While these are not remembered as fondly as some of the later entries, you have to give this figure credit for just how pioneering it is. So I have to say, this is probably in the range of a solid A, if I were to give my opinion.
That sounds fair. It had a very important role, but at the same time, there were definitely some flaws, whether it be the helmet design or overall flimsiness. I think it's interesting how we don't really see that helmet piece reused very often in the future. Doesn't really seem to come back today.
Indeed, it was a very unique element, and it was used for the next 3 or so years in such as the Joust set, a very nice set with some brick-built horses and a prince and a queen. So while this element does see some use later on, it is very rare to find in good condition today.
It's good. So what do you guys think for that? If you didn't get the link, it's right there.
It appears we have 1 B and 3 A's. So the majority has the correct answer.
Is this a live result, or do we have to refresh? I think it's live updated, right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Let's move
Will
it up
you
to an
update
A.
this on our sheet? Yes.
Let's see, where is he? There he is. Up to our first A. Good start. Look at him, he's looking over slightly at his score.
Very well. We are ready for our next entry. This is the Crusader Knight. This is the first, one of the earliest heroic factions. Back then, there were only two factions, the Crusaders and the Black Falcons. At this time, there wasn't as much distinction between the uniforms. We saw a lot of breastplates. They didn't have as much emblems as we see today. So this gives them this one has a very nice color scheme. It's why I selected it. The blue on red with the gold printing on the emblem. It's a very nice classic style. The black on the belt and the helmet work very well together. So I have to say, this is one of the more iconic figures of the Castle line. However, it is not as unique or special. So I'd say a B for this one.
He sounds fair to me. I love the simplicity of the helmet design. I feel like you could still use it today for things. There's no
Yes.
extra frills to it or anything.
Yes, it is very simple, and it was used up to the mid-2000s, I believe.
It's very interesting that LEGO used Crusaders for a theme, because you think today they'd be worried about like any religious connection to Crusades, but back then it was a little bit more free. Not quite as worried about that.
I suppose so. The medieval era is not my area of expertise. I had to do much research just to appreciate the Castle line. I am more of a LEGO space aficionado, and that is where my expertise lies.
That makes sense. We definitely saw your enthusiasm in the space episode.
This has a very diverse mindset here. We have three Bs, one A, one S, and one S plus. Very curious. Given the upward trend, I believe we have to make this an A.
Sounds fair to me, right in the middle of that.
Yes. However, I would put it just below our first entry, the Yellow Castle Knight.
Sounds good. Let's see. Where is he? Right here. So he'll be at the second of our A's, just below the last one. Very nice.
Next, we have the Black Falcon Knight. This one we've seen in various iterations up to 2010, and even in some of the collectible minifigures as few as about 3 years ago, I believe. So this character is very, very iconic. He's recurred in several LEGO themes throughout the eras. It's a simple color scheme with black on blue, silver instead of gold on the emblem. It has a very menacing look to the emblem with how the black and silver is split up. However, I do not believe that there is a certain simplicity to this, which both works to the figure's advantage and disadvantage. So I would say this one is a solid B as well. Personally, I believe the color scheme works a little better here. The simplicity works very well, the silver on the blue. I really appreciate that. However, let's see what do you think, Your Majesty?
I think I'd be pretty much in agreement with that. I have noticed that it seems one of the most popular factions as far as like sets go. People always talk about the Falcons, but in general, there's not a whole lot to it. It's simplicity is what it's got going for it.
Yes. So it is true that the Black Falcons are very popular. However, I don't believe the figures stand out as much. So
Very
let's
fair.
review the results. It appears that it is missing. Therefore, we must use our discretion.
So we have the chat shout out to score? Or?
Yes. Allow chat to voice their opinion. How do you vote the Black Falcon Knight?
What do you think, chat? Shout out and answer in the chat. Anyone have a strong opinion on this one? For changes was S plus. He really liked him because he is happy though. That's his logic.
That is a very flawed methodology for approaching this critical review. However, I will say let's leave it at the same. Let's leave this at the same level as the. We'll leave that this at the same level as the Crusader because they kind of are on the same footing tactically.
Got an S.
All right.
Okay.
I believe a low A is fair.
Low A is fair. So will this be the lowest of our A's, or
Yes.
where did I? There he is. Nice. Everyone's an A so far.
Next, we have a peasant minifigure. We have seen several peasants throughout the 80s and 90s. However, this is one of the very first. We have a simple gray torso, blue arms, a nice new element for the head. It's a little wrap to protect from the warmth of the sun while he's out doing missions for the king, building, collecting crops, moving objects, all those tedious jobs that the plebeians are expected to do. So these characters are not very intelligent, but they are very useful for fulfilling their role. They are very creative. They're not very unique. However, I do like the simplicity of the uniform, the little bow around the shirt. I cannot tell you. This was the only image I could find on Bricklink Archives. However, as I was saying, this model has is very similar to the Forestman we will be looking at shortly. It's actually a recolor of the Forestman, which we also see much later using the Magician in blue. So for this figure, I have to say I quite like the aesthetics of this figure, but given his class role, we have to demote him to a D. It's a D. Very clearly.
D, you thinking? I'd put him a little bit higher personally, maybe with C range, and possibly because we don't see as much like Lego villages in the castle theme as I would like. It seems to mostly focus on the actual the knights themselves. I mean, there were a few sets in the last castle theme. I think it might have been the one before, the one that had the skeleton in it. It had like a village set and a set of like a farm and a mill. But in general, it seems a lot of times you don't see the regular lay people of the land in the castle theme as much as you just see the knights.
Indeed, and the civilians, in theory, do hold much more of the power than the knights. However, they are much less inclined to act on it, and because of this passivity, they are less interesting. They're less important. We have someone very emphatically saying C. I have to say that is very generous for this class of person. However, I will not disagree. We have 3 Bs, 1 C, 1 D, and 1 S plus.
That bumps them up to maybe a C minus, you're thinking? I think he's still a D.
In the interest of assuaging the public, I'm willing to compromise on a C with this one subject.
Just for this one. Sounds good to me. Let's get him up to C. As you can guess, I'm not the best at Where's Waldo. Okay, there he is. Awesome.
Next, we have the Forestmen. Now, these are nomads that make their own rules. You see the influence of classic English myths such as Robin Hood. We have a very early introduction of green uniforms, totally green hat, arms, legs. This is the most green figure we've seen up through in all of the 90s. So this figure stands out from any other figure. I quite like this figure for this character is clearly a free thinker, a free builder. He knows what he wants to do. Even if he is trapped in a medieval era, he is very forward thinking and non-compromising, always thinking on his feet, always getting out of sticky situations. Therefore, while this isn't as special as any of the space figures we see in the future, I have to say this one is at least a solid A.
Solid A seems fair to me. I am pretty impartial, though, so any forest or green theme gets a little higher than it should in my book.
I was surprised because these figures are not too thrilled about monarchy.
Oh, that is true.
Yes.
Fortunately, there's not many foresters in my kingdom for me to contend with. We burned down the forest long ago.
Oh. We need to have a talk about that later. As I was saying, we have 2S, 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1S plus.
Well, big divide there. All over the
Indeed.
place.
Some surprisingly low results as well. I believe we must resort to our own discretion here and call it an A.
A sounds fair for sure.
I'd put this one as our highest A personally.
I'd be in agreement with that. That's the representation of Robin Hood himself, almost, you could say.
Indeed.
Why? Well, let's try this way. There we go.
Next, we have a blacksmith. Now, this is a very interesting figure because it uses the same head wrap as the peasants. However, we see a very new element, a cape used backwards. Your Majesty, would you show our audience the figure?
Oh, that was up there. There we go.
So as you can see here, this figure is wearing gloves to protect his hands from when he's working on metal, forging weapons and armor for the king and his knights. He has a unique apron element. This is the only figure that has this apron in brown. It's turned forward, and it's a very ingenious using it as an apron. So for all of it, this character's simplicity, he doesn't stand out too much. But this character is clearly very important in the function of the kingdom. He has almost as much power as the king himself, I would say. Therefore, I would say this figure ranges between an A and a low S.
A and a low S. Wow, it's a little higher than I would put it. I think the only thing very outstanding about him is the apron piece. So I'd put him closer to a low A, high B, but
let's review what our audience feedback is.
what do you guys think? How did you like the blacksmith?
2 C's, 1 F, 2 S plus, 1 B. This is a very polarized field. So I am willing to, given your authority in this area as the king of the Brit Kingdom, I will allow you to choose where this figure goes.
I will settle on a B, I believe. A high
Very
B.
well.
Let's give him... Oh, there we go. As usual, I'm slow at finding him. Oh, there he is. Very nice. Look at all these smiley faces.
Next, we have our first maiden. This was one of the... this is a very feminine figure. We have one of the first non-smiley headpieces with the red lipstick and some hair printing. And I have to say, this figure strikes me as kind of an ugly wench. I don't quite like how the facial printing works. It's a little bit too simple on the lips. It doesn't quite stand out the way we see in the future female figures. So I must say this one ranks very lowly for me. I'd say, however, the colors are nice. We have a white on blue, very simple, very effective. Overall, this is low D, maybe F for me.
I think that's very fair. I mean, if you need convincing, look what the headpiece looks like in the corner there about any additional parts. You can't even tell it's a female head other than the lips.
Yes, it is sort of... I quite like the headpiece. It is very unique, and it was only produced in a few sets. However, overall, I don't believe this works too well.
That seems fair. So what do you guys think?
2 Ds, 1 F, 1 F minus, very good. 1 S,
Very good.
1 B.
So where does that put us for an averaging there?
The lowest of the Ds.
Lowest of the D's you're thinking? Awesome, let's do that. And so our maiden here is going to be the lowest of D's.
You may wish to show our audience.
Oh, it's not up there? There we go. Juggling all these tabs. Yep, so I just put her right there, the lowest of D's. Well, the only D so far, but we'll remember that if we add more D's. Hello, Brickframe Ultra. Thanks for joining us. Get a small viewer spike there, you latecomers. If anyone
Next.
needs the link to vote, I'm just going to post it one more time. And who we got next?
Next, we have the Black Knight. Now, this character seems to be affiliated with the Black Falcons. It is very difficult to tell. Again, most figures in these areas, in this era, used different colored variations of this breastplate armor. So their direct affiliation isn't quite clear as they are in later factions. However, this is one of the earliest appearances of the second wave of visor headpieces with the lowering visor piece. It has a bunch of extra attachments now, like the dragon on top with little wings on the side. It is a very detailed figure, and I have to say I quite like how the black and the dark gray is very unusual even in the early 80s, even in the early 90s. So I have to say this figure is at least an A, possibly S.
I think so. I might lean towards S. If every single knight had all these like extra pieces on the helmet, it might look kind of gaudy. But the fact that these like it's a rare edition makes him deserving of some special recognition.
Yes,
Definitely looks good on him.
This figure does appear. We see these headpieces and the armor appear in other figures throughout this era. However, the Black Knight wears it the best. Therefore,
Definitely.
I believe we should give him all of those rights and privileges of a high A or even an S.
Let's see what the audience thinks. Do you guys in agreement between A and S, or what do you guys think?
S plus, overwhelmingly.
Oh wow, they loved them.
2 A's, 1 B.
I'd say that brings them at least to an S.
Yes, I concur. High S for this figure.
High S. Oops, share my screen. Am I missing them? Am I blind? This one?
Near the right.
Oh, duh. Let's go up a little bit. Our highest one of the day so far.
Indeed. Next, we have the royal king himself. This one, around this era, this was about the mid 90s, and we saw much more around this era in both Golden Age Space and Golden Age Castle. We saw much more emphasis on theming of emblems. So we see a very imposing lion head in the center, the checkered shirt pattern, and a very unique cape piece. There is no other cape piece like this out there.
I'm a big fan of that cape piece.
Yes, as well as a very large, very imposing helmet, red facial hair. I believe this head printing may be exclusive to this figure, so that makes him very, very special.
It's actually my great-great-great-grandfather, not quite my dad.
Interesting. We also have a nice little necklace going around, and that is actually holding up the emblem on the shirt. So all the little details, considering the limitations on the detailing at the time, this is very, very advanced, very unique detailing on a figure. I feel like it is lacking slightly because the helmet piece is gold, while everything else is just yellow. So you have to subtract just a little bit for that. However, overall, this one is a strong. In deference to your lineage, I'll say this is an S.
I would agree with that. I think it's a high. I'm a big fan of that lion emblem in particular.
Very well.
What do you guys think?
3S plus, 2S. 2A.
I think we should settle for this.
Given your expertise in the realm of monarchy, I will leave this to your discretion as well.
I think we'll go with S. And yes, AlphaGo plays. I do remember you. Thanks for joining us. If you need the link to vote on what you think of the minifigures, I just posted in the chat again. Brick Danger says S plus even. Let's see. I will give him the S he deserves. Now, do we put him ahead? I think he deserves to be the highest S. What do you think?
I concur.
Very fair. King should always be in the top.
Yes, of course. But they must always listen to their advisors.
That's true.
Shall we continue?
We shall. Next we have
a Royal Knight. This one is very reminiscent of the Crusader Knights we saw earlier, with a new version of the torso with black printing, with the line printing on the torso over a shield. It's a very nice emblem. However, this one figure doesn't stand out nearly as much as the Crusaders or the Black Falcons. Even if it is part of your lineage, you have to consider this figure doesn't have as much style or impact as the king himself. Therefore, this figure isn't any more than a C.
I think I'm in agreement with that. I mean, I'm partial to the lion head once again, but yeah, he doesn't deserve much higher than a low B, high C. Yes.
Another thing to consider is this was one of the first castle figures to actually recycle the pirate's headpiece. You see the mustache here, and the facial stuff.
It's a sheriff, is it not? So I think it's a sheriff as well.
So it is interesting to see this face recur in castle.
What do you guys think?
This one appears to be missing as well. How unusual.
How strange.
Very well. We have no choice but to give this one a high C.
I see it is. Let's see. Oh, I always lose them. Oh, there we go. You think I'd get faster at finding them as like the list now is down, but I don't seem to. Now we have a question. The highest C or the lowest C? High C, you think?
High. This character is just fodder for the king. However, he's more intelligent than a simple peasant.
Sounds fair to me. What do these little sprockets do? I haven't played with them.
Oh, those are for adjusting the position, I believe.
I'll leave them be. Sure. What is your question? Gold plays. Look at the next figure on screen. We're waiting for you to respond.
I have very mixed feelings about this. I mean, it is a scientific fact that ghosts are not real. This is just pure superstition. So, I have to say, this figure is very backwards, very out of place. We appear to have a comment. Where did we find these figures? These figures are archived on the website Bricklink. That is where we recovered all the data on all the images for this model. So you can check them out there and see all of the other variants of these figures that we were not able to cover on the show. As I was saying, ghosts are not real. This is very clearly an F-. This is
F-.
I don't know what else to tell you. Ghosts are not real.
Does this figure have glow-in-the-dark feature? I know some of the ghosts did, but I can't remember how late that was added.
That is true. This variant does have glow-in-the-dark, and he does have a smiley face, so he is a happy ghost. I'm sure Someone will be very emphatic about that. So, while I prefer this over some of the later variants, which just have sort of a frown, sort of a horrific expression, I do appreciate that this one has a smile. So, instead of an F minus, I am willing to put this up to an F.
I put them a little bit higher, maybe in the D range. I'm not sure what it is with the smiles, but for some reason, the same thing in the skeletons. The happy skeletons, I seem to like more, and the ghosts in general, I just have a lot of fond memories of. Even though they weren't the best design choice, they were kind of wacky of being like a sheet over a person. It's more like a person wearing a sheet than an actual ghost.
If you want to indulge in these superstitions, that's your prerogative. Let's see what everyone else thinks.
I'd give it a little higher than F for pure imagination, not for scientific soundness.
Well, you are entitled to be wrong. So we have 3S plus, 1S, 1A, 1B, 1F minus. Someone in the audience is very scientifically minded, and I appreciate your contributions. Now, I find this baffling. I thought that our audience would be a little bit more reasonable, and I cannot accept this being any higher than a D. This figure is no more than a D. Ghosts are not real. Is that understood?
Sounds like a good compromise. We'll say the highest of Ds, though.
It is true that even if this imaginary creature is more attractive than the Wench Maiden.
Gold plays, it's not quite the same as Vitruvius, but I think Vitruvius was supposed to make a throwback to that classic ghost figure. Let's see. So, what did you say in relation to our wench here? It should be?
The wench is much uglier.
Okay, right above it.
Next, we have the Wolf Pack.
Wolf Pack's a very popular faction.
Yes, this one is somewhat similar to the Nomadic Forestmen we saw earlier. However, this one is much more of a hostile faction. It has an intimidating white wolf emblazoned on its torso. Everything else about this figure, the brown earth tone colors, we see some of them with a green cap, I believe. So this is very clearly an offshoot of the Forceman faction. However, overall, the style on this figure, it's a mixed bag. What do you think, Your Majesty?
I think I've been in agreement. I like the brown, but in general, it seems to kind of like mix them into like peasant more than like it's a unique theme. If you're trying to mingle several castle factions together, it'd be hard to like really have them stand apart from like your regular villager minifigures, especially like the brown hood.
Not only that, but the colors do not stand out that well. We have white, black, brown, and red, which is
all over the place.
It doesn't pop as we see in such as the Royal Knights. Therefore, I have to say, as much as I appreciate the brown elements here, which were still quite unusual, this was even more rare than the green at the time. So I have to say this one, it's no more than, I have to say it's no more than a C.
C sounds about fair to me. What do you guys think in the chat?
3 A's, 2 B's, 2S plus. I see some people are still insisting on being wrong. I respect that. I suppose we could go with the lowest option presented here, which is a B. What do you say, Your Majesty?
I could be swayed to give it a B.
Very well.
Do we put it above our blacksmith here or below him?
Below, I would say.
Below. Seems good. I should show the chart. Yep, so I just placed him for reference. Is the chart up? Yep. Right here.
Yes, another thing to consider is this faction was concurrent with the Royal Knights, and he would have been a constant pain in the backside of your ancestor, which is another reason you want to demote him as far as possible.
I'm in agreement of that.
Next, we have the wizard magician. And as we all know, magic isn't real, wizards aren't real. However, I do like the style on this figure. We have a recolor of the forestman and peasant look, torso printing with in blue this time. We also see the introduction of the beard piece, which was used up till the early 2010s, I believe. We also see a very nice cape in black.
I think it's the same as the apron, the blacksmith figure, except reversed.
Indeed, this was a much more common usage for him. We also see this element appear in various other castle figures, such as a few knights. However, they don't stand out as much as this figure does, which is why I selected him specifically. We also see the introduction of the wizard hat. So this figure is very stylish, very, very incorrect, very, very superstitious. This character likely is involved in alchemy, divination, all that sort of fictional science, shall we say. Therefore, given this character clearly isn't very smart. He's probably mad. Therefore, I say this figure is it's an F. It's definitely an F.
An F. Oh, that's very low. I'd have him all the way up, maybe like a C or a B at least. See the audience falls in our dispute.
4S plus. S1A.
A lot of believers in magic.
I suppose, in a manner of speaking, the magician wizard is the equivalent of in the royal kingdom as the scientific advisor is in your kingdom. Therefore, despite his clear ineptitudes in certain areas of science and clear, for all this character's faults, he is the closest thing to a scientific advisor. Therefore, I can be persuaded to give this character an S plus.
S plus?
Yes, S plus.
Wow. Very, very generous of you.
It is the overwhelming opinion on the consensus. I have to say that while I was not wrong with my assessment, I am open to new ideas.
So all the way up on the top.
Correct.
Wow, it's very generous. Oh, guards, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Next, we have a sight that would put even the wench maiden to shame. This is the Fright Knight's Witch. We see this figure is very unique. A tattered cape with we see a tattered cape with an arachnid on the back. We also see a very intimidating black on red we see in all of the Fright Knights figures, and a very unsettling facial expression. It's a evil grin. She's lost most of her teeth. She has one sticking out. This figure is nothing short of terrifying.
Willow's her name, is it not? I'm pretty sure it's Willow the Witch.
I am not that familiar with the Fright Knights, so I
She
cannot.
appeared in a few games. I think the name appeared. I think in Racers 2 she was and I was pretty sure.
Interesting. So I do like the spider aesthetic. It's a very good look for such a vile person. And this character is suitably ugly. So for that reason, I give this character an F minus, but it's for all the right reasons. This character,
F minus, right reasons.
This character is meant to look ugly. This character is meant to character is meant to infuriate you. Therefore, it is a well-deserved F minus. What do you say, Your Majesty?
I think the scale kind of flips. We think of it in terms of infamy, then it could be near the top. Depends. Are we thinking of it as a positive for it to be near the bottom? Does it desire as a villain to be near the lowest of the low on the chart?
Keep in mind this is also a magician and magic isn't real.
You have to consider that as well. I'd put him near the opposite. I'd say at least like an A for the uniqueness of this figure. What do you
We
guys
have
think?
a very polarized set of opinions: 2S, 2S plus, 1S, 1A, 1B, and 2F minus.
Ooh,
Correct. I will say, what was your final verdict, Your Majesty?
I had said A. Let's see, which end is it more tilted towards? The F
It's.
minuses do weigh it down, so maybe we could drop it down to a B.
I was thinking a D, but
Compromise to C in the middle.
very well. A low C.
A very polarizing one.
Yes,
It's possible some of us will be wits to give her a higher score than she deserves.
indeed.
Think the lower end of the C's?
I concur. Next, we have,
Ooh, Basil.
yes, this is the Bat Lord. This is a very striking, one of the most unique figures in all of Lego Castle. We have the bat wings, very reminiscent of the bat element introduced alongside the Fright Knights. So we have the cape with the Fright Knights printing, the red and yellow and black on the torso printing. I have to say this color scheme works really well. It is very late 90s Castle in aesthetic, and I believe this is a very coherent color scheme. This is a very intimidating figure, and I quite like it.
I'm very fond of him as well. Basil's one of my favorite figures in Castle history. We've seen him in a few games, like Lego Racers 2 once again. I'd have him all the way up in an S. The only downside is he's got one ugly face there underneath the mask. He's
Yes,
much better with the mask on.
that is true. The facial expression kind of resembles an upside down bat, like it's a bat hanging upside down.
It does kind of, yeah.
However, I believe you're right. It is overall a very ugly face. It's a very ugly face.
Weird
But
hairline.
yes, it is still a very sinister face. And
Very
for that
sinister.
reason, I believe a low S, high A is fair for this figure.
Low S, high A. What do you guys think?
3S plus, 1S,
Oh,
1F, 2F minus.
ooh, that's polarizing. We got to go on the lower end of what we said then, and no higher than an A. I'm thinking
Um,
lower
I
if we
have
take Chat's opinion into account.
I have to say this is a very interesting. Since this is not my area of expertise, I will defer to you, Your Majesty.
I don't want to be blind to the opinions of the people. I will say a low A then would be my compromise. I'm sorry, Basil. I would have done higher by you, but how low an A is the question. I'm tempted to put him mid A. I'm gonna put Basil at least here because I'm just so impartial to him.
I would put him above the
One
Crusader
more
Knight.
in the middle. Okay, the middle of the A's. You got a solid A, Basil. Guard is
Correct.
saying B or B plus.
Next we have the Dragon Master.
So many unique shapes.
This one is a very unique, very short-lived faction. This character saw the introduction of the 90s dragon figure, which is very blocky. It's a very adorable design, even
I
if
love that
dragons aren't
dragon
real,
figure. Yeah.
even if dragons are totally fictional creatures, at least in the primary Lego world. So I have to say, I quite like the helmet for this figure. It has a very intimidating bulk to it. It slightly resembles a samurai helmet, just slightly. It has all of the intricate little details on the headpiece and the wings. You can't see it from this perspective, but the headpiece actually has the little plume on the head has a little dragon on it. Therefore, for all the styling on this figure, it's I say It is quite high, at least an A. For the
I'd be in
torso, I
agreement.
don't believe that the front with the yellow and the black with the themes coming out the front, it is not nearly as impactful as the insignia on the back. Therefore, I can't say it's an S.
I'd rank it pretty highly, maybe a low S. I like that there's not a single element about him. It's kind of like that's simple. His legs are different colors. He's got two different color arms. There's a pretty unique chest piece. The helmet is just so many little pieces added to it, especially the little dragon plume. And I love the cape. How not only is it a dragon, it actually looks like the Lego dragon from that time.
Yes.
So the only way he loses points to me is just like pure amount of unique things. It almost gives him like a little bit of a gaudiness.
Yes, I concur. It's a little bit too busy, especially for the 90s. The colors are a little too different. They clash a little bit too much.
Almost like a gesture more than a knight there. So maybe a low A.
Let's review. 3S plus, 1S, 1B, 1D, 1F minus. That would average out to an approximate A.
Approximate A. We did have a question. What is the theme next week? Have we decided what we're going to do for next
We
week?
have not. I would like to discuss some of the various other miscellaneous Lego themes throughout the 90s, some of the more obscure ones, like Lego Western or Lego Time Cruisers.
Time Cruise, I'd be very interested to see. That's one of the most bizarre themes we've gotten.
Yes, it is a very enigmatic line in Lego history.
I think this guy's a little bit too fruity to be above Basil here of his outfit. So I'm going to put him just below Basil.
Yes, I much prefer Basil. Basil has a much more coherent color scheme.
Brick Danger said he wants to see Western.
Yes. Western is an incredible mixed bag for figure design, and we will discuss that extensively.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Next, we have the third iteration of the Forestman. This is from the Dark Forest faction. We see here he has a new brown torso piece, as well as the green legs and hat that we see in the original Forestman. This line also saw the return of the green Forestman uniforms with some different arm colors. So this was very clearly a return to form for the Forestman. The facial hair is very reminiscent of Robin Hood. He has a nice little strap, which gives him a kind of pirate's vibe, which I very much appreciate. However, another thing to consider is this character, however noble, is quite opposed to the monarchy, is quite interested in doing his own thing. And he is not nearly as iconic as the full green Forestman. Therefore, I say this character is an A just below the original Forestman.
That sounds about fair, just because I'm not too partial of brigands who oppose the crown, so I might give him a little bit closer to a B, but a low A I can compromise to.
Yes.
What do you guys think?
This is our most polarized result.
Oh, wow.
We have 1S, 1A, 1B, 2 C's, 1 D, and 1 F minus. This is a very peculiar result. It appears, I believe this is partly in result because of their deference to you, because this character is an opponent of your rule, or the monarchy in general. Therefore, it must be acceptable to put it around A. I would do a high B personally.
High B?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, let's see. So many buttons. There we go. High B. And how high a B is the question? Highest B? Or
I would put him at the highest.
B. That sounds fair. Next we have...
Finally, we have this, the Knights Kingdom 1. This was around the turn of the millennium and about the cutoff point for what I consider to be the golden age of Castle. We see much more of a modern and detailed color scheme, a little bit too gaudy like we saw with the Dragon Masters, but it still has the 90s aesthetics. So it's blue on red, the return of the royal patterns with the lion head on the chest. Very interesting belt printing, very detailed belt printing with all different patterns on it. Little cape on the bottom. What we have a comment. What is Professor Godt wearing on his head? These are my Visual Magnificator goggles. I use them for studying minifigures up close and identifying relics. As I was saying, this character sees the return of the chrome gold helmet, which is used from the mid-90s all the way up to the present. And the facial hair, I say, is very interesting, much more detailed than we see in the past. We have several much smaller black lines built into it, more of a white beard. This character is much older, much wiser, maybe even related to the royal king himself. Therefore, I say the overall colors for this figure, they look a little bit diluted compared to other castle lines. But for the facial printing, I am very impressed with that. He has a very wise appearance to him. Therefore, I say this character is a low A, between a low A and a mid S.
Sounds fair to me. I lean higher to S. I am a little biased because I think this is like the first Lego King I've ever gotten was this one. His lion emblem isn't quite as bold as in other figures, and why he is a little bit gaudy, I think as a king, he has more leeway to be gaudy. He's supposed to stand out, as opposed to a knight is supposed to not be quite
That
as
is
colorful.
true. And
I love the face print too.
another consideration is this character sees an orange. This character has a sort of orange instead of a gold, and the orange is very close to the skin tone, and it doesn't fit the chrome gold helmet, and that detracts several facts. That's at least one order of magnitude for me personally.
That sounds fair. So I'm thinking maybe a low S. Let's see what chat thinks.
Between an A and an S.
Between an A and an S, what do you guys think?
King Leo is an overwhelming S plus with 1A, 1D, and 1F minus. And whoever has a 1F place the F minus, that is very scientifically incorrect. We are very supportive of the monarchy here in this. The scientific advisor is very emphatically supporting the monarchy. I just want to make that very clear.
Thank you.
And therefore, given the majority opinion, we have to make this at least a high S.
That sounds fair to me. I thought of one other point I had forgotten that gives him a little higher ranking. In Lego Soccer Mania, he's actually the leader of the King Leo's Lions soccer team and their goalkeeper, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe a S is fair. A high S is fair.
S is very fair. Oh, thank you, Brick Danger. I'm glad you liked it. Besides Mock Hour, though. Okay, that's still high praise. Mock Hour is a high standard to beat. The show will catch up. Mock Hour is an older show than this. Let's show the screen. So we're thinking. Oh, let me scroll up. Is that a high S?
Yes.
Hmm.
I put him right behind the last king. The royal king has a slightly more coherent style to him.
I agree, yeah.
And a cape. A very fantastic cape. If King Leo had a cape, that might put him an S plus. However, as it is, no.
Sounds fair for sure. And who do we have?
No cape. Next we have Queen Leonora. This is one of the first attractive female minifigures. They finally figured out how to make lipstick not look awful on a minifigure. It's a very simple, small lipstick. It doesn't cover up the whole face, looking like she's going overkill. It's very understated compared to what we've seen in the past. Nice little curls on the hair on the side. The same ornate headdress. It looks a little bit better here. The red on blue robes are very, very well done here. I have to say, this character is an enormous improvement.
I'd
There,
agree. Maybe even the definitive Lego Queen, if anyone thinks about any Lego Queen historically.
I have to say, this one is at least a high B or up to an S.
I think that's fair. I was thinking closer to A, but that's right in the middle of a range there. I like that she has the keys there. It almost gives like a function. So a lot of time with the medieval factions, you're not sure quite what to do with the queen figure, other than that make her just like stand there if you're playing with them. But you actually can have a role which use the keys, so you can have some connection maybe to the dungeon, use the key to it, or the key to the chest. So if a raiding faction is attacking the castle, they have to find her and get the keys to be able to get to the king's treasure.
Yes, it is a very unique. I very much like the torso and the leg printing, how that flows together.
I agree. So we're thinking an A. What does chat think?
This one is quite polarized. We have two S, one A, one B, one D, and two Fs. I have to say, I understand chat's opinion. The face is still somewhat divisive. At this time, female faces were not quite as polished as they should be. So I have to that demotes it a few ranks. Therefore, possibly a between a B and an A. It is still a queen after all.
There's not as many B's. We'll put it. I guess we'll define it as where does it rank between? Oh, do I have my screen up? Yep. Between the Forester and the Falcon Knight here. That'll determine if it's an A or a B. Do you think it's above the Forester, but below the Falcon Knight?
I would put it high B personally.
High B. The highest B?
Yes.
That seems very fair. In recognition to her rank and status.
Precisely. Next we have Princess Storm. This is a very unique minifigure, one of the first princess minifigures we have. A reasonably balanced female face, a nice little lipstick print, a little bit of hair. It's sort of jagged down. She clearly means business. She has a nice little knight helmet with a little red plume on top. Sort of yellowish gold printing on the torso, and the red on the legs blends in with the plume. Overall, I am quite impressed with this figure.
I'd be in agreement. Princess Storm's one of my favorite figures historically in Lego Castle. She actually has a little bit of backstory. Well, you probably can guess most of it, where she's both a princess and she kind of like moonlights, because the term is a knight secretly. I believe it might be different versions of it. I'm not positive. And this is kind of the figure you'd give your little sister to play with, so she doesn't have to just be a princess and do nothing. If she wanted to join in, she could actually still join you in your battles. And
it's not overwhelmingly effeminate. Does have slightly female curves to it, but at the same time, it looks like this our breastplate can take a punch. It has a nice little golden triangle in the middle. All these little slightly regal elements to it. This character is possibly my favorite in all of the first wave of Knight's Kingdom. Therefore, this character is quite possibly an S.
I think I'm in agreement with that. I very much like the tomboy look it has to it too.
All right. We have 4 S's, 1 A, 1 D, and 1 F. I believe, given the majority opinion, this character is an S.
That sounds fair to me. Princess Storm is very much a piece of Lego history. How high up in the S's, though, is the question. Let me scroll up a bit. Yep. Does she beat her father here? I believe the King Leo is her father, if I'm not mistaken.
Given sheer rank and political importance, the king is slightly more important. However, for style, you have to give it to Princess Storm.
Yes, and we don't get to find out much about what her legacy was like when she inherited the rule from her father. We can assume, just based on her early career, that she rose to even higher height than King Leo, possibly.
She quite possibly became a merciless warlord, so we shouldn't get too much into that.
That's probably why Lego cut off the story there and didn't tell us anymore.
That is my theory. Next we have Cedric the Bull.
Cedric the Bull. I remember him.
The enemy of the the heroic faction in Knight's Kingdom. He has the horns. I believe the horns appeared in either the western, either in just some of the creatures, or actually it appeared in the Islanders.
Islanders, yeah, as well. Some of the helmets had it.
Yes, and this is I'm not sure if this is a chrome gold. I believe it's actually a chrome bronze on the helmet, which is very rare. It is a very detailed, very unique headpiece, which I quite like the headpiece. However, the rest of the body is somewhat bland. We
Yeah.
have the red, brown, red, yellow, and the dark gray. It's a little bit too much going on. It doesn't. It's menacing. It's villainous, but it's not nearly as striking as the Fright Knights. Therefore, this character is probably a B, honestly.
I might give him a little higher just purely for the legacy he has, because he's appeared in so many different like Lego media. There was a lot of like I believe posters of him in it. He appeared in I think he was in both Lego Island 2. He was in Lego Soccer Mania. What else have I seen him in? I know. Oh, there's one other one I can't recall. Oh, Created Knight's Kingdom. That's what I'm thinking. He's been in a lot of different things.
You are the expert in the field of medieval history. Therefore, I will leave this to your discretion. Let us view what the audience says. We have 2S plus, 1S, 1A, 1F, 2F minus.
Ooh, that lowers him down. So does that make him maybe a high D, low A?
That would be my personal verdict. However, much of a legacy this character has, the overall aesthetics bring him down significantly.
Okay, maybe a high B then. Sorry, Cedric. I say above these, but does he beat our queen here?
Not in style, but definitely in menace.
Style of menace. I'll put him above the queen.
Very well. Lastly, we have the Skeleton Knight.
Skeleton.
Now, this character is one of my personal favorites from all of LEGO Castle, because this character was actually excavated from one of the ruins of one of the old castles. So as someone who has minored in archaeology, this character is very near and dear to my heart. He has a nice little smile. He has a very well-preserved helmet. Therefore, this character is very clearly an S+. Let's view what the audience has to say. Everyone is in complete agreement. This is a definitive S+. What do you say, Your Majesty?
How could I disagree? The people are united. My advisors united in them, all in agreement. I think he has to be an S+. I'm very partial. I don't know what it is about those happy skeletons, but for some reason they just make them seem more fun than menacing, and it makes them more. How much? Try to say it up. Did I just hit something? I think I did.
Given the scientific consensus, this is clearly above the wizard.
Above the wizard?
Yes. The Skeleton Knight is clearly the highest of all of the LEGO Castle minifigures ever. Any other? Amazing. Yes, it is very clearly one of the most iconic and memorable figures from all of LEGO Castle, clearly emphasizing the legacy of LEGO Castle, since we haven't seen a LEGO Castle in several years.
Be in agreement. I prefer them very much over the more modern castle skeletons we got. What was that? The early 2000s we got them in? Maybe mid 2000s?
They've appeared. The cutoff was with the first castle, the 2007 castle, I believe, when they started getting red eyes. Around the early 2000s, we saw Alpha Team with the slightly crooked smile, which wasn't quite as aesthetically pleasing to most of us, I would say.
I'm still the most fond of that smiley face skeleton.
I am in complete agreement. I believe we have finally completed our golden age of LEGO Castle tier list.
Awesome. I like that distribution. What's highest near the middle, lowest near the edges. Seems like it came out pretty clearly.
A very pyramidal structure, very appropriate for a hierarchy such as we see in the Castle caste system.
So go ahead.
Anything else you want to say before we discuss what we're doing next week?
Also want to say is Lego Castle is probably the most beloved themes of Lego's history, and we're very hoping they come back with a new one because some of all these old figures are still some of the most best Mega figures we've seen to this day. And things like Nexo Knights haven't quite come as close, or even the last was it Kingdoms you got before that? I think we got one more castle after Kingdoms. Didn't quite live up to the old figures. I'm hoping we get some more classic castle era stuff coming back soon as something that can live up to its legacy.
We will be discussing the other castle lines and the various future iterations, the Renaissance iterations of all these themes at some point. However, next week we will be tackling the Western theme and various related themes.
Western's another very popular one.
All right. Anything else you wish to discuss, Your Majesty?
I think I'm good unless there's nothing more from the chat. Anyone have any final questions for myself or the professor?
Very
We
well.
said we're going to be doing Wild West next week.
We will also be taking suggestions for official themes. I'd like to go in somewhat chronological order, starting from, we have gone through most of the Golden Age themes, the big ones already. However, I would still like it to at some point discuss more of the traditional town. There's also figures. A very controversial one would be to do Fabuland, or some of the more obscure Paradisia stuff.
A lot of people might not even have heard of Fabuland, so yeah, I think our viewers would like to see some of that.
Very well. I will add all of that to my notes and continue my research. And thank you everyone for joining us. And until next time, play well.
Sounds good. Signing off.